fact of the matter is look, we're all going to answer to him. But I live by that faith. And if we work together and lift each other up, we will build this red wave and red conservative movement that will benefit all of us.
One of my favorite Bible verses came to mind. It's Joshua 1:9. God commands us to only be strong and to be of good courage. Yes, we're a wireless provider. We're a cell phone company. We have great coverage, nationwide coverage on 4G, 5G networks. We have 100% US-based customer support. We check all the boxes that say that we're a cell phone company. But here's the deal. Our mission has nothing to do with cell phones. Our mission is to relentlessly defend our God-given constitutional rights and freedoms, and to do so in a way that glorifies our God.
My name is Lee Wamskans, and my pronouns are Bible believer, Jesus lover, gun carrier, and mama bear. Well, we are the nation's only Christian conservative wireless provider. We have 4 pillars: the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the sanctity of life, and we support our military and first responders. The First Amendment, our freedom of speech, our freedom of religion, the freedom of press, the freedom to address the government with your grievances, to hold them accountable. Biden calls that domestic terrorism. Patriot Mobile calls that freedom.
Turning Point USA, we say that chapters change the world. We are Americans, and we are going to win.
Traditional masculinity, marked by stoicism, competitiveness, dominance and aggression, is harmful.
Now in 2022, masculinity is being redefined.
Toxic masculinity. The gist, masculinity is poison.
Wait, hold up. I got a God, don't change with the season.
This is what men need. This is what young men need. This is what y'all need. We got to put the fire to these gentlemen, because they will rise out of that ash. But if it wasn't hard, it wouldn't work.
ACA, that's the law. New sheriff in it. KB on, passing balls. I'm a lawyer in the booth. I ain't never seen nobody do it like this. Owns every inch and I rule it like this. Look at my world, that's a little.
What limit can we reach tomorrow? Mentally, physically, spiritually. And when you go home, you'll have all this stuff in your tool belt.
How is God breaking you now to prepare you for the future? Life is going to be hard. How is God using that? How is he breaking you to prepare you for your purpose?
I got a God, don't change with the season. 10,000 reasons I can believe it. God so good, say less, I'm breathing.
We're gonna do this 1,000,000 times. This is number 0. Y'all are in the beginning group. We're gonna do this forever.
Are you pretty fed up? The old conservative movement can't come to the phone right now. The same lie is being fed to women today, that you must be like a man to be successful.
Modern feminism is literally the worst deal ever. I want out.
The left, they couldn't fill up 2,500 women in a room because they can't tell you what a woman is.
It's true. Men built the world, but women raised it.
We are the ones who have decided that the old way of doing things is dead. We are not the same conservative women anymore.
I'm thrilled to be back with the young, proud, and energetic patriots of Turning Point.
5,000 young conservative students in a room together saying, I love America. I'm willing to do something about it.
This is what freedom feels like. This is what freedom looks like.
If you're willing to speak the truth, they will attack you.
They are the invading force. They're the ones that have taken over our institutions.
But in times like these, it's not enough to just be right on the issues. You've got to be willing to stand up when it's not easy. You are the generation that is going to stand up and save American freedom. We are one movement, one people, one family, and one glorious American nation.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm glad everyone's excited. Turning Point USA has the honor of hosting one of the biggest leaders in the conservative movement this evening. And I know everyone came here to listen to Candace Owens tell you the truth, or as someone on the left may label it, offensive misinformation. But I'm here to just make a few comments first. I would like to thank CUPD, EPI, and other law enforcement personnel for not only their amazing help today and working to keep us safe, but for their diligent and courageous work every day. We are forever grateful for them. Next, I want to thank the Clemson administration for advocating for freedom of speech and the diversity of thought. It is a privilege to have an administration like that. It's not every day you go to a college campus where the administration allows someone like Candace Owens, so we really appreciate them. Also, thank you to Turning Point USA for supporting our chapter, for providing us with all the resources and training necessary to pull off an event this size. And I would also like to note that we will be doing a Q&A after Candace's remarks have ended. So there will be 2 lines in the aisles with microphones. So if you'd like to ask questions, you can just make your way and form a line between those 2 aisles. Now, a little bit about who you really came here to see tonight. Candace Owens made her political debut in 2017, and shortly thereafter, she co-founded the Blexit Foundation, a cultural movement aimed at the development of urban minority communities and the promotion of traditional American principles. From 2019 to 2021, Owens worked for PragerU, where she hosted The Candace Owens Show. Additionally, Candace Owens is the host of her podcast, Candace Owens, and is a New York Times bestselling author of her book, Blackout: How America Can Make Its Second Escape from the Democrat Plantation. Owens is also the host of Candace, a political talk show produced by the Daily Wire, in which Owens discusses current events and frequently exposes the hypocrisy of the left. Now, it is my absolute honor to introduce to you one of the most influential and prominent figures in the conservative movement, and someone who I personally look up to and have looked up to for a long time. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Candace Owens.
I love this stage. This is awesome. I feel like I can see everybody. Thank you guys. I did not hear them announce me, so I was just like, let me know when to go. It is so wonderful to be here. This is actually my first time at Clemson, I think. So pretty amazing to be able to, first and foremost, I want to say, be at a university where I was just speaking with the Dean of Students, Dr. Miller, and he's the first dean ever in the history of all the college campuses that I've been at who came back and said that they actually are excited to have both conservatives and liberals on campus, that they actually welcome a dialogue, that he's very excited and he wants people that disagree with me to be here and embracing different ideas. That's actually never happened in all of my speaking on college campus. So just a tremendous thank you to Dr. Miller. And I think that that's actually a great place to start. So I'm going to ask the question, how many people in this room, and this is not to point you out or say anything bad about you, actually don't fundamentally agree with Candace Owens and her ideas? That's so awesome. Give these people a round of applause for being here, because that's awesome. And when the opportunity comes, we definitely want to make sure that if you guys have any questions that you're on the front of the lines, that you can have the conversation. Let me tell you guys, 100% better than most people if you even showed up, because we're somehow in a world now where people just can't listen to an idea that's different from theirs, which I find to be absolutely crazy, and you cannot learn if you do not want to listen to different ideas. So thank you guys for being here. So much I want to talk about. First and foremost, if you've heard anything about me, you've never actually heard me speak, but you listen perhaps to the media snippets about me, then you've probably read the wildest things that it has to defy reality at a certain point. Sometimes I read my own Wikipedia page and I cringe. I'm just like, what? Candace is a self-hating black person, a white supremacist, internalized misogynist. I guess I've internalized hating women. And you just go, how do you get here? How is it plausible that people can write these things, and that not only people write these things, that people actually believe that? Like, what would be the upside of being an internalized misogynist, white supremacist, black person? What would I be doing? Like running around fighting to create a society that I can't live in, that I can't thrive in? It doesn't make any sense, and yet they go with these things, and it's so extreme. And when I see these things, I think to myself, why? Right? Why not just actually tell the truth? Why mischaracterize the things that I believe? I mean, in this society, which is so race-obsessed that we live in today, you would think that they would be so proud to have a person that's come from nothing, that's worked really hard. These are good principles to follow, things that I believe. I don't just believe them because they're in my head. I believe them because I have the experience. You know, I started as a liberal. I think a lot of people do in their youth. I think, You want to believe in a lot of the things that the left sells. You want to believe that things can be that easy. Obviously, I had a major awakening actually following college. So when I was sitting in your chair and I was at university, I was a liberal. And let me tell you how different the world was then. And Clemson might be unique because it doesn't seem like it's UCLA or Berkeley where they burn down the building if a conservative speaks. But I always tell those students when I speak on college campuses that this is what you're seeing today when you see these videos of people storming and protesters screaming. This was not the world 13 years ago when I was on college campus. I was a liberal. I didn't vote, but if I had voted, I cried the night that Obama won, so that should tell you where my politics were aligned, at least. I remember actually sitting and crying, being, oh my God, the world's going to be amazing now. We have the first black president. My best friend, on the other hand, was a Republican, and that was totally fine. Republicans and Democrats were allowed to be friends. It wasn't an existential crisis to have disagreements. I can't remember even one protest on my college campus when either a conservative or a liberal came to speak. It was just, okay, they're allowed to speak and share their thoughts. And so much has changed in a very short amount of time. And I want you guys to know that everything that you're seeing is not normal. America has shifted. America has taken a dark turn. And it's not helpful to have the media baiting this, making it worse by not telling the truth about what's actually going on. So I want to clarify for you what I actually believe and where my belief system came from. And I think it probably starts with my experience on what that turning point was for me, why I went from someone who cried the night that Barack Obama won to the person that I am today, right? To the person that hit the ground running in support of Donald Trump. These two people have nothing to do in common, right? You would just not think the person that cried for Obama would be the person who, the first time I actually cast a ballot, was for Donald Trump. So, first and foremost, college campuses, and not just college campuses, high schools, middle schools, elementary schools. One thing that I think I've always recognized about the public education system is that they're not so much interested in people learning how to think. They want to tell you what to think. And there is a huge difference. And I always go back to the story of probably my only high school teacher that I stay in touch with. And he and I speak, and he always says, you know, Candace, if there was one person who I could have bet was going to be doing what you're going to be doing, it would have been you. Because I was really hard-headed. I was naturally hard-headed my entire life. My parents will tell you I was just one of those knock 'em dead kind of kids. You know, you once in a while you see a kid who's like this, who's just so sure of themselves and is constantly not pushing back against authority, but pushing back against, I would say, arbitrary authority. So I didn't like what my parents would say, like my parents' favorite phrase ever, because I said so. Like when they say do this and you say why, then they say because I said so. That to me was just like, even at the age of 4, this didn't work with 4-year-old Candace, you know? I wanted an actual reason. So if my parents said, clean your room, and I would say, why? And they said, because I said so, I'd be really frustrated because I wanted them to give me a reason, because your cousins are coming over, right? I want to be able to think like a person, not somebody that is to be ignored and just to respond to arbitrary authority. And I had the same opinion when I was in high school, and this high school teacher who I speak to reminds me of this time that we were taking a quiz, and it was on World War II. And I just constantly always had my hand up asking questions when he really did not want me to have my hand up. And there was this question, and it was the critical thinking segment on a test regarding World War II. And it said, you know, why did America have to drop the bombs on Hiroshima? Everyone started answering because that was the way you were going to get your 5 points. And of course, me, being Candace Owens, raised my hand, and he was sort of like, what, Candace? And I told him the truth, which was that I didn't like the question. And he said, okay, Candace, this is not really, what doesn't really matter if you like the question. And my reason for not liking the question was that the answer was already implied in the question, right? Why did America have to drop the bomb on Hiroshima? Well, that means that America did, in fact, have to drop the bomb on Hiroshima, and you're now to remember that and explain away why that was possible. Now, maybe in a critical thinking question, they would have said, did America have to drop the bomb on Hiroshima? Very different question, right? And maybe, all by myself, I would have said, no, of course, absolutely, America did have to drop the bomb, and this is why, but I didn't like the way the question was phrased. And unbeknownst to me, I would pretty much figure out later on down the line that these are what are the things that I think separates liberal ideology from conservative ideology. So I'll now jump you through to when I was at university and I took a course called Women's Study, I think it was 250, and it was basically Feminism 101. I was required to take it, even though I was a journalism and English major. And in this class, and by the way, at that time, just to remind you, I was on the left. Feminism sounded good to me. I think a lot of the things that the left pitches sounds good. Who could not be a feminist? What's the pitch? Well, it's about equality between the sexes. Are you against equality between the sexes? No, of course I'm not against equality between the sexes. So you're a feminist. That's kind of what we learned in this class. But the class was weird, you know, because I was somebody that was taking it as a prereq, but other people in the class, this was their actual major. These girls were feminists, you know what I mean? Feminists, not shaving the armpits, like committed to this ideology, feminist. And so I'm in here and I'm like, I agree with these girls. I agree we need equality between the sexes, but the class became something different, and I started realizing that she wasn't really challenging us to think. She was just kind of trying to get us to remember one thing and one thing only, and that thing was that men suck. Men suck. They've always sucked. Everything that we're going through as women is because men just are making things miserable all the time. She kept referring to this patriarchy, this thing, this boogeyman, if you will, that you're constantly fighting. So the purpose of the class was to pretty much convince us that no matter what happens to women at any point throughout human history, the problem is men, because men run the world. That's kind of the thesis behind the patriarchy. And we had a textbook, and I wish I could remember what that textbook was. I bet I could go back and find it in an old URI catalog. But we had a textbook, and she would go through problems and statistics, and she would say, you know, why does this problem exist for women? And if you wanted to get an A in the class, it was very simple. All you had to do was explain why or how men caused that problem, right? If she lost her keys that morning, oh, why did I lose my keys? Men are the people behind the keys. They are the ones creating the keys. Engineers are predominantly men, blah, 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 blah. Men like cars. And she'd be like, hey, that's wonderful. That's amazing. And there was this one particular class, and I wrote about this in my book, and it really stuck out to me because I was sitting in this class and just eventually realizing it can't always be the fault of men, right? It can't constantly, I mean, come on. And she pulled out the statistic, and I think it was in the 80 percentile. Don't quote me directly at this time, but it was something like 89% of individuals in America that suffer from eating disorders are women. And then she said to the class, why? Yeah, you know, men, obviously, was the answer. Men. And then she went on, she talked about advertising agencies. She talked about how men control advertising agencies, and men want these beautiful women, Victoria's Secrets, women on the screen, and women are emulating that, and that's the reason why we all have eating disorders. And I took great issue with this. This one really defied common sense for me, first and foremost because, well, I was a woman, and I know that exclusively that calling each other fat is pretty much a girl-on-girl crime. Girls say more things about other women's appearances than anybody else. Don't even pretend that this is a man thing. You know, it's like, no, if we're going to really talk about appearances and why girls feel a certain way, we got to talk about what girls do to one another, because no one will tear you down more. We can be vicious to one another. I rose my hand in this class, and I realized at this point that I probably should not have taken this course. And she realized that weeks earlier, actually. She used to make me stay after class and write, I am a feminist on the board, literally. And I knew this was going to be one of those classes where I was going to have to write, I am a feminist on the board. And she said, what, Candace, what would you like? Why is your hand up? You know, that was her face. Why is your hand up? And I said to her that I had an issue with that statistic because I felt like it was ignoring some other things. And I asked her a question. I said, okay, what about some other statistics that we could examine? If this is your argument, you know, what percentage of people in the United States are injecting themselves with steroids to make themselves look big and look buff? Maybe that statistic is 90% of men are doing that. And would you say that that's because of women? Do we make men feel like they have to be big and buff? And she was horrified. She literally was like, oh, because of women? No one's ever said that in this classroom. No one says this in feminism. It can never be because of women. And she said something to me that I will never forget. And she said, Candace, I genuinely feel like you were sent to me from the men's department. I thought, what an odd thing for her to say. What a strange thing for a professor to say to a student. And I said to her, ma'am, respectfully, I think that I was sent to you from the common sense department because Respectfully. Because there's just no way, right? I'm with you, you have me, I am a feminist, I sit in this chair in this classroom, but this is getting a little ridiculous. And if you've read my book, Blackout, then you know where this ends. The reason why this class was so crucial and why this became an incident that I had never, ever forgot is because in that classroom, as I was sitting in that chair, I had an eating disorder. And so I knew what she was saying was BS. I knew that the reason I had an eating disorder had nothing to do with men. It had actually nothing to do with women either. It was a control mechanism. That was it. It had nothing to do with weight, even. It was just all about a way that I felt that I could reassert control in my life after something that I lived through when I was in high school. And then I realized this is actually amazing. She's sitting here in a class filled with women, and rather than her turning to the women and saying, hey, this is a statistic, why do you think this statistic is the way it is? Therefore requiring us to think critically, therefore requiring us to come up with some answers, therefore requiring us to share our personal experiences. She was instead trying to brainwash us to believe that men were at fault for all of our problems. And what a bleak outlook that is. This is what I would say for me is something that is a seed in what now has burst as the modern feminist movement, which is something that I despise, which seeks to actually divide women from men, which seeks to make women hate men. It's something that I can't even comprehend this. I can't actually comprehend where it's all going. But it also is something that I think about in the retrospect often, because what happened in that classroom is something that is happening in society today. And I didn't have the wherewithal to understand it like I do today, but it's very important. It's the difference between how the left thinks and how conservatives think. You see, with liberals, it's a game of opposites, right? If you're short, just blame tall people. If you're black, just blame white people. If you're poor, you should just blame rich people. For what you don't have, you just have to look at the opposite and say, this is the reason why. If you're a woman, you can simply blame men. It's thoughtless. It's completely thoughtless. It isn't critical thought. It just go, I don't have that, and it must be because of the opposite. They externalize every single problem that they have. If there's a problem in my life, then I have to seek why that problem is in the outside world. And I think that conservatives, we do the exact opposite, right? We internalize the problem. If we have a problem, we say, this is my problem, right? And I have to fix it. What can I do to actually fix this? I am in the driver's seats of my own life. Something that I always say to people is your life is your fault. It is. Your life is your fault. Things can happen to you in your life that are not your fault, right? Things can happen to you. Circumstances can happen to you. We don't know what a child, who your parents are going to be, but ultimately when you become an adult, how you respond to those things is entirely your fault, right? That's what we believe as conservatives. But again, I didn't have that perspective when I was in school. That perspective started to shape for me with the election, or actually the candidacy of Donald Trump in 2015. I remember him coming down that escalator, and I will never forget my first thoughts. I said, absolutely not. No way. Ew, yuck, gross. The patriarchy, I don't know, right? And I remember being like, are you kidding me? How are we going to go from Barack Obama? He's so eloquent. Listen to the way he speaks. Honestly, this is a man that could sell salt to a slug. Even if Obama was lying, he just sounded so nice, right? It just sounded so nice when he lied to us, right? It did. It sounded really nice. And then they want us to go to Donald Trump. And I just went, oh, no. Not the guy that says you're fired. How embarrassing for America. These are all the things, like how embarrassing if this guy becomes a president of the United States. He's the guy that says you're fired in the boardroom on an NBC show. That would be so ridiculous. Absolutely not. There was no way that I was voting for Donald Trump in 2016. They didn't even have to make a pitch to me. It was an absolute, not a defiance that I felt in my soul. And then something weird happened because I just thought to myself, he shouldn't be the president because he is a celebrity. And then the media that I trusted, CNN, MSNBC, all of my good sources, right? The trusted faces, Rachel Maddow, Don Lemon, all these people that I spent my whole life believing. I was a journalism major, so I knew how to check for good sources. All you had to do was go to the Washington Post, the New York Times. I learned this in the classroom on university campuses, right? I was educated, very educated. And so I turned to my sources, and then the thing that was weird was they weren't saying, well, just because he's a celebrity. That would have been like, yeah, that makes sense to me. They were doing something way different, and they were so saying things I had never heard about Donald Trump. They said he was a racist, he was a sexist, he was a misogynist. At one point, they said he was incestuous, that he had feelings for his daughter. Do you remember this? It was actually a real thing. They tried to make us believe that he wanted to sleep with his daughter. And I went, whoa, 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 hold on. Okay. I definitely don't want him to be president of the United States, but where did all this come from? You guys just missed this? He's been on the TV for like the last 30 years. At this time, he was also an icon in hip-hop culture. If you listened to a Beyonce or a Jay-Z song, I grew up listening to hip-hop, R&B. People wanted to be like Trump, sipping poolside at Mar-a-Lago. You're telling me we just didn't notice for the last 30 years when we had him on TV that he was a rapist, sexist, misogynist, racist pig who wanted to sleep with his daughter? That seems a little suspicious to me, right? So I had this little question in the back of my head, like, could the media be hyping this? Like, could the media actually just be sort of saying this stuff because they don't want me to think, because they want me to react emotionally, because they know that I'm black, because they know that I'm a woman, and they know that when you say these words and you dangle these words in front of a black person, well, if I say it's racist, then you must jump, black people, because now it's an existential crisis. If this man becomes president, and this is really what they were saying, he's going to bring back Jim Crow. This is real rhetoric from my trusted sources over at the New York Times, right? It basically made you think that, from the time of Jim Crow, people were just waiting for the right president to come along, and then they were going to re-put back together the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, this was literally the rhetoric. It was meant to terrify black Americans. So what are you supposed to do? Get out and protest this man that's been on TV and on red carpets and posing with black celebrities for the last 30 years. But trust us, now that he wants to be president, we've realized he's actually a Klansman. And I just went, kind of want to raise my hand and ask a question again, like I was in feminism class, like, maybe there's something else going on here. And then I watched a speech live. I was just curious. I watched a speech live of Donald Trump. He was in Dimmondsdale, Michigan. It was a speech that changed my life. And he was addressing black Americans directly, and he spoke about the statistics of black America. He spoke about crime, he talked about poverty, he talked about incarceration. All the statistics were true. And then at the end of his spiel, he said, you've been voting Democrat for the last 60 years. Why don't you just try something different? Black America, he said, what do you have to lose? Look what's going on already. Look at these numbers. And I said, I kind of like that pitch. Nothing too crazy. Not saying he's Superman, but he's saying, hey, why don't you just try something different, You've been ordering the same thing. The meal hasn't come back right. Why don't you just try something else? I said, all right, I like that. And then I went back to my trusted sources over at the New York Times and Washington Post and CNN, and you would have thought an atom bomb dropped. They said, he looked black America in the face and he told them that they were poor, that they were living in filth. So true. I mean, the things that they said, the hyperbole, I was like, no. I just watched this speech. He absolutely did not say any of these. It was the most realistic whatever pitch, going over statistics, and they were like, I can't believe it. The racism, what he said. They were doing the things like taking their glasses down. Don Lemon, I think, cried a little bit. It was a lot. It was a lot. And I went, okay, you guys are just lying. How could you do that? I know that you guys don't normally lie. This must be, maybe you guys got it wrong. Maybe you didn't watch the speech. Maybe one of your executive producers got it wrong. And then I did something that I was so embarrassed and ashamed to do at the time. I won't forget this because, I was on the left and I went to my room and I didn't want my family to see me because this was a dirty thing I was about to do. And I closed the door and I pulled out my phone and I typed in www.foxnews.com. Just to see what the racists and the sexists and the homophobes were saying on Fox News. It was just a little, just checking. And would you believe that they were reporting accurately on what he had said? And this threw me for a loop. I went, whoa, okay, come on. It's foxnews.com. I know what this is. This is crazy. They must have just gotten something right. And I remember then going over and pivoting, going to Breitbart.com and checking all of these sources, embarrassed, ashamed. Oh my God, what would my cousins, my brothers, my sisters, what would everybody think? I'm on FoxNews.com. It's not right. I'm black. How could I do this? This is crazy. And then I kept going back and I kept checking the rhetoric. I decided to instead watch Trump and hear what he actually said rather than watch the reporting of what he said. And it was shocking that everything that those trusted sources told me was basically a lie. It was drama. It was theater. And that was not easy. You know, I can talk about that in the retrospect with confidence and with humor, but let me tell you, that was like falling down a hole. It was scary. It was honestly scary. I thought I was going crazy. I mean, how old was I? 25 years old? You imagine waking up one day after 25 years committed to a certain belief system only to realize that up is down and down is up. It's scary. You go through a period of real psychological cognitive dissonance. You start to wonder, am I going actually crazy? How could this be? I've learned this in school. I learned that the party switched. I learned that the Democrats were the party that were championing black people. I learned that the Republicans were racist and backwards. How could I have gotten this so wrong? Waking up from brainwash is a very scary experience. It was scary. I spent a year, and I said, what is my next move once I pushed past this cognitive dissonance? And this is the hard part, and this is what most people don't have. Humility. Actually saying, I was wrong. Admitting that you were wrong. And that's hard because a lot of times when it comes to politics, we go really hard, you know? We will be on Facebook like, if you even share a Donald Trump post, delete me as your friend, right? Like, people are very theatrical on social media. So you don't go from saying something that hardcore to suddenly being like, oh yeah, you know what, actually, I might vote for him. You can't. It's hard. It's very hard. So I suffered this period, and for a year, what I did was I decided the next logical step, the thing that would have been easy for me, it wasn't like I was going to watch Tucker Carlson every night. That was too big of a step. But I decided to go instead read up on some of those black conservatives, those people that I had dismissed as Uncle Toms, right? They wrote some books, Dr. Ben Carson, Clarence Thomas, Thomas Sowell. I wanted to go look at and see what the Uncle Toms had written about. And God really does have a sense of humor because the amount of times that slur has been used to describe me, and it was what I thought about these people who I am just amazed by. Thomas Sowell, I credit him with saving my life, honestly, reading his books and finally actually receiving a real education, understanding Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell and their arguments for capitalism and the free markets, understanding why we need to fight to protect these ideas, what makes America so unique, why people should be rewarded based on their behavior and their contributions and not based on their appearances, the economics behind it. That what Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell gave me honestly saved my life, watching their series on YouTube. And then what happened after a year, and I still didn't vote for Trump, I didn't vote for anybody because it was just falling down a hole. But what happened was then I was really angry. I was really angry because I just thought to myself, why? Why would someone want to convince me of my own victimhood? Who benefits from that? Why would there be an entire ecosystem via the Department of Education that is hell-bent on teaching people to align with certain victim groups? Why? And by the way, that's probably a really big question that you ask yourselves a lot today when you look up and you just go, what the heck are we even arguing about? I mean, go back in a time machine in your head even seven years ago. If someone said to you, hey, in the near future, people are going to be arguing about bathroom signs. Not enough pronouns on that door. You'd be like, are you crazy? No, it's chill. Everyone's like, male, female. You just go with bathroom. It's not going to happen. You would have thought they were crazy. So this is one of these things you just go, why? Who benefits from an argument? How did this become an argument? Nobody cared. And then you look at other things like, climate change is another one where I see these videos of third graders that are walking out of school protesting climate change. They just with their backpacks, like, we're not going to class today because the world's ending or something, right? You just go, why? And also, who are your parents? Because if I just walked out of school, my gosh, my parents would have found me, right? Who is Greta Thunberg's person? Who's her mom and dad? Why is she on a ship boycotting school for a year? Why? I have so many questions, right? And you go, what does this have to do with anything? What are the bathroom signs and the LGBTQIA alphabet soup community, what does that have to do with Greta Thunberg? Like, why are we just picking things to argue about, right? Why do we want little 8-year-olds to think that the planet is going to be over in 10 years? And by the way, let me tell you something. If you are at any moment being convinced of that argument, please just speak to the generation above you and the generation above that, because every 10 years they come up with a new way that we're all going to die, that we don't die. When I was in school, we had to watch Inconvenient Truth, which was Al Gore's documentary, and they said you have 10 years and you're all going to be dead because of global warming. We had to watch a video of polar bears drowning. I don't know why that was their thing. They were like the polar bears. They were like, they're all going to drown. There's going to be no more polar bears because the earth is getting really warm. And polar bears, by the way, are not that nice, but this was the pitch. It was like, and I remember watching this and being terrified. Why would they want us to watch this in health class? By the way, quick little update, in 2011, the Earth started to cool, so they don't say global warming anymore, and the polar population has gone up. So they were wrong, but who cares? Being a climate alarmist means never having to admit you were wrong. The generation before me, they were told that the planet was going to be over because of global cooling. Talk to people that came up in the 70s. They were told it was going to freeze, it was going to be over. There was the ozone layer, there was the acid rain, the ocean. I mean, they just keep telling little kids they're going to die. It's completely crazy. It really is. It's a doomsday cult. And then when the kids don't die, they just move on. Why? What does that have to do with anything? Well, I'm gonna tell you how it all ties in with one another. Feminism, what is that, right? Modern feminism, getting women to hate men, telling women you don't need a man, right? We've dressed down manhood. Men, we don't need you. We can be bad all by ourselves, right? And then at the same time that you're telling women to man up, right? Do it all by yourself, climb the corporate ladder, don't aspire to family, these are the lessons. Don't shave your armpits, nobody knows why, but don't do that, okay? At the same time that we're telling women to man up, we're telling men to act like women. Toxic masculinity, that's the term, right? Another one of their fruity little terms. Toxic, are you acting like a man? Are you standing up straight, right? Something's wrong with you. Do you have testosterone? Something's wrong with you. You need to fix that. Do you want to go play sports and drink a beer? Something's wrong with you. Toxic masculinity. You need to be a wimp. You need to walk with your tail in between your legs, right? They're telling women to be angry when men hold doors for them. What? Telling women, if you really want to show how equal you are, when he takes you on a date, demand to pay half. Okay, guys, you can do that. Sounds like the worst deal ever, right? Who's having a problem with this? Yeah, no, you can pay for me. Just chill, right? But this is what we're fighting to end. Why? And I figured it out. I figured it out because I was talking to one of my many mentors, Dennis Prager. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. And I was in earnest asking him on my podcast, like, what are they after? What do they want? And he gave me an answer. He said, Candace, it's just chaos. And I sat with that, but it didn't feel right. You know, I guess it's the Batman, you know. Some men just want to watch the world burn, maybe. But no, I don't believe it's that. It's something much more Machiavellian. And one day I sat and I really thought about it, and I came up with the answer of what all of these things have to do with one another. And the answer is family. The answer is family. You revisit those topics, and what is the one thing that they tell people that are climate alarmists? They tell them that it would be irresponsible for you to start a family because the planet's going to be over in 10 years. You have people that are agreeing publicly and receiving awards like Prince Harry and Meghan Markle for agreeing to only have 2 kids because having any more would be irresponsible. The climate lobby is about shrinking families. You have people like AOC who have publicly come out and said that she's not going to have kids because she's concerned about the future of the planet. And we are all okay with that. We're all okay with that. Definitely not going to let her, definitely not going to get in the way of that. Because the plan's going to be over in 10 years, that's why. It's all going to be over. But that's it. That is the thing. They're brainwashing kids to believe that family is something that is not aspirational. It's something that is irresponsible. And if you love your planet, you won't have kids. And then you revisit the alphabet soup thing. They're adding new letters, and you're going, what is going on? How many letters? I mean, it's the full alphabet now, right? What is this? What better way to attack a family than to tell children to mutilate their own bodies? What an unbelievably evil cult before children even hit puberty, convincing them to take hormone blockers, the same hormone blockers that they give to pedophiles in prison, Lupron. That is the drug. It is not blocking your puberty. It is meant to chemically castrate you. You can't stop taking that. Unless you stop immediately, it completely ruins your body. I went back and I revisited I Am Jazz on TLC. We watched a child be abused over 8 seasons. Jazz convinced that he could become a she. Where's Jazz today? It's been 10 years. Jazz is now 100 pounds overweight and clinically depressed and says, I don't know who I am, even despite the fact that Jazz went through with the bottom surgery and literally castrated himself. Could you imagine that? All for our enjoyment on TLC. We could watch this mental disorder play out. This is what it is. They are training children to mutilate their bodies because you know what Jazz will never be able to do? Reproduce, ever. And before Jazz could even think on his own, his mother signed him up for television to play a human experiment on a body, because that is what this is. This is Frankenstein. They're harming children, and people are standing by and allowing it to take place. And they know exactly what they're doing. This is the push for everyone to identify as something other than male and female, because it takes a male and a female to have a productive family. To reproduce, it takes a male and a female. So let's encourage everybody to be anything but. Do you feel like a fish today? You can be that. This is what it is. This is what gender ideology is. It's an attack on the family unit. You revisit the topic of modern feminism and why it's you don't need a man. Because they don't want you to have a man. They don't want to see men and women together. It is why they have so undervalued men in this society. And let me be the first to say, there is no society that can survive without strong men. Do not be ashamed to be a strong man. And the perfect yin to the yang is women that lead their households. Do not be ashamed to aspire to be a stay-at-home mom, to know what is going on with your kids. And so the reason that they want people, the breakdown of the family unit, which is what unites all of these topics, is because it's right out of Karl Marx's playbook. It is what Marxist and what communist societies understood. When the state seeks to become totalitarian, when the states to dominate every aspect of your life, it must eradicate families. Families are in the middle, right? Families are what disrupts the state having full and absolute control. It is a pillar that must be destroyed. Need evidence for that? Look no further than Black America, because that's what happened. People like to talk about the statistics, the crime statistics, the poverty statistics. What they never talk to you about is how that directly correlates to whether or not you come from a 2-person household. Doesn't matter what your race is. If you want to know why Asian Americans, not white Americans, contrary to the media depictions, Asian Americans are the most successful people in American society, it is because their families stay together. They have core family values that are not disrupted. If you want to know why the Nigerian Americans and the African Americans are the immigrant communities that come here and find such success, it is because they have good family principles and family values. There is a direct correlation between this. In the 1950s, when Jim Crow was still in place, this is a crazy statistic and it is true, Black Americans were outpacing white Americans in terms of economic growth in this country. Under Jim Crow. It's unbelievable. And then what happened? Jim Crow was shattered, and in its place, the welfare state was created. And what the welfare state promised to do was to disrupt Black families. They said, you don't need a man in your household. The government will give you more money. They employed people to go around to Black homes and to say, we will give you more money if the father does not live in the household. Could you imagine that? The government knocking on the door to make sure the dad is not there. In the 1960s, a single motherhood rate in the Black community, back when we were outpacing white Americans in terms of economic growth, was, I want to get this exactly right, 12%. And they said this was an epidemic. They said, oh my gosh, the families are not together. 12% of black Americans are growing up without a family in a home. Fast forward to today, and the single motherhood rate is 74% in the black community. 74% of black Americans growing up without two parents in the household. This is the societal ill that nobody wants to talk about, the breakdown of family. And now, of course, they are extending that because if black America was the experiment of how much control the government could have over individual lives if they broke down the family, it was a very successful human experiment. And they said, okay, now it's time to extend that to the rest of society. Now it's time to make sure that the government has dominance. So these are the things that I learned through being able to read and receive a true education. It is a way that I have learned how the world makes sense throughout all of this lunacy. It is Machiavellian. It is ever so intentional. They know exactly what they're doing. They want everybody to become welfare dependent. Maybe it's because they've castrated their bodies and now they need Medicaid and they need Medicare and they need the government to pay as they suffer from osteoporosis and they suffer from mental disease. The idea is to turn every single person into a government slave. It is the reintroduction of slavery once again in America. It is the modern plantation. Same rules, by the way. For slavery to have worked in America, it required certain elements. First and foremost, slaves were not allowed to learn how to read. Think about this. Across 5 schools in Baltimore, they couldn't find a single child that was proficient in reading. Look at the statistics. Despite the fact that we've never handed out more degrees in our society, we are producing, and this is a fact, the dumbest kids coming out of college that we've ever produced. The IQs, I'm talking about literal IQs, are lower. So how does that work? How are we giving out more degrees and yet producing dumber kids? That's intentional. Because what they want are kids that feel like their egos are inflated because they're holding a piece of paper, right? Oh, I got a degree in gender studies, woo! I'm a doctor in gender studies. I don't know what that means, man. Figured that out when I was in kindergarten, 2 genders. What do you mean? How did you spend this much money in school to get a gender studies? The degrees are getting more and more ridiculous, right? These are not academic degrees whatsoever. These are soft subjects because they want to inflate the ego of these individuals. Because then what happens when you get out into the real world and you're a gender studies doctor, whatever that is you realize no one wants to hire you. You get met with reality really quickly because it turns out that nobody in the history of the world ever on the planet of human civilization has ever said, I really need a gender studies major, get them here quick. Never been a sentence that's uttered. But you do need the guy that didn't go to university and can fix an AC in the summer. You'll pay that guy any amount of money. You guys are in South Carolina, you know what I'm talking about. How much do you want? $10,000, take it all, take everything. Please just get this car AC to work. Practical skills, working with your hands. But then what happens is when that gender studies major figures out that the world doesn't need that, and they still have this inflated ego, they become angry and they become bitter. And they become angry at those people that have found success because they have real skills, because they are able to contribute something in this free market society. And these are the people that become your protesters. These are the people that become your Antifa members. These are the people that now do the government's bidding and say we need to crash the system of free markets and we need to crash the system of capitalism. Capitalism doesn't work. It doesn't work for you, right? Because people don't need that. And so what I want to, and I want to get to questions, but what I want to implore you guys to think about is how they are playing on human emotions, how they are intentionally dividing our society, and all of it is to benefit the government. And that is because ultimately what they want, and this is why there are routine attacks on Christianity, is the government seeks to become the God in your lives. When you have a problem, it wants to be the answer. When you need something, it wants you to get into line, to get into another government line. It wants you to ask the government for everything. It wants to become a sort of a-spiritualism, you know? And it is so important that the first way that you change that is by being conscious of it, changing your aspirations, wanting to be someone that can meaningfully contribute in this society, and not allowing people to brainwash you into being pushed into another victim class. America doesn't need more victims. We need more victors. Thank you so much for having me. Let's take some questions. Where should they line up? Here? Oh, both sides, guys. So if you have questions, both sides, come on down.
It'll make it easier for both sides. Yeah. You said you're gonna work. Yep. I appreciate it. Hey there, kid. Is it on? So, who all has a disc? Can everyone quiet down a little bit? Hey there, Candace.
Hey.
I'm Drew. I'm a senior here at Clemson. Nice to see you. And so your whole spiel is that, like, you know, all lives matter, right? But
Sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. My spiel is...
Yeah, sorry. Your whole spiel is that all lives matter, right?
Oh, well, yes, of course.
All right,
I mean,
awesome.
That's not what I said on stage, but yeah.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
But do you believe that Palestinian lives matter? And I ask that because the fact is that the U.S. sends billions of aid and weapons to the Israeli state, which via the IDF indiscriminately carries out regular attacks on not only the Palestinian citizens, including children, but journalists and even an American citizen who was crushed by an Israeli bulldozer who is trying to protect a Palestinian family's house. Israel continues its violent settlement of Palestinian land that is illegal under international law, under UN law, and displaces citizens and further impoverishes them in the name of Zionism. Now, Israel is also an apartheid state. A law recently prohibited Palestinians from naturalization, a basic civil right. And even if they're married to an Israeli, they base this decision on the desire to, quote, remain Jewish, aka an ethno state. Now, I could go on with my examples of Israeli atrocities. My question remains, do Palestinian lives matter? And should we not withhold all American funding to Israel that perpetuates genocide against the Palestinian people?
Okay, so there's a lot in that question. So first and foremost, let me just answer the premise of your question, which is that 100% all lives matter all across the world. What you're talking about is a very specific foreign policy issue, which you are much more educated on than I am, and I have made a habit of saying to people that I'm not going to pretend to know everything or to have solutions to everything worldwide. Obviously, I'm very focused on Americanism. I'm very America first, and I talk a lot about things as a nationalist, which is what I am. One of the things that I think disturbs me about the Palestinian and the Israeli conflict is that there's not enough debate about it. It seems that it gets shut down in the same way that I don't like debates being shut down when it comes about America. Like if you say I don't like Black Lives Matter, they go, if you don't agree with Black Lives Matter, then you're a racist. You know, if you don't agree with that Israel should be a state, then you're an anti-Semite. And I think that ad hominem attacks are ridiculous. And I think that at university campuses, people should be allowed to have that debate. And I have not actually heard a meaningful debate between people that are pro-Palestine and pro-Israel. Like, so we don't even get to think about the issues as it really is because people are just name-calling on both sides. If you support Palestine, they call you a terrorist. If you support Israel, they call you an anti-Semite. And I don't think it's meaningful. So I would like to see more debate about the issue. You're more educated about it. I wish I could add more to it, but I'm just not comfortable talking about an issue that I haven't studied intimately. But thank you for your question. And yes, all lives matter everywhere.
Yeah,
I want to let everybody answer the question, but thank you for your question.
Hello.
Hey.
So I have a question. I'm not one of the people who I would say agree with you. Okay. I'm more of an independent type of person, and
Best
I like
way to be.
Like see both sides.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like clarification when you compared, I guess, modern day government to slavery, because in my mind, as a historian, that's something that is very problematic to make that like to even compare the two. Because yes, I do think that textbooks lean more Republican as well as liberal, because I grew up in South Carolina. In South Carolina, it definitely was one of the first states to succeed and to really be pro-slavery. But I don't think that it's fair to make the conclusion that...
Let me clarify. So what I said is it's a modernized plantation, and I mean this, and I wish I had one of my books to give to you because I spell out the entire argument in the last chapter of my book. Which is to say that obviously you couldn't go around having actual slaves in a plantation to say it wouldn't be allowed. And what I believe that they have done, quite Machiavellian, is picked up the same techniques of realizing that first and foremost, if you want people not to know that they're slaves, they can't be educated. Examine the literacy rates amongst Black America today. It is absolutely abhorrent. Black America it's unbelievable how few Black Americans are graduating with an ability to read, and yet they're largely emotional. The reason why they wanted to sustain those literacy rates, the reason why it was literally punishable by law to teach a slave to learn how to read, is because they knew that education is the freedom of the mind. I'm a perfect example of that. Once I began reading Thomas Sowell books and actually first time becoming educated, I've never been more capable in my entire life. My whole life changed by just understanding topics formally and not because I was emotional. So I say it's a modernized, updated technique, you know. Also, in terms of lynchings, now obviously, if you're a Black person, you're a conservative, they're not going to whip you. I mean, they're not going to cut your limbs off, but go Google any Black conservative and see what's said about them. Go read my Wikipedia page. If you don't think that we're suffering social lynchings for having the audacity to think for ourselves, pay more attention. If Black Americans are really free, then you have a right to be an independent, he's got a right to be a liberal, and I've got a right to be a conservative, and then the media should treat us all fairly. Just say that we disagree. They don't do that. They are after my head. They've been after my head every day of my life since I said that I was a conservative and that I wasn't a victim. You know, there are all different aspects that I am talking about, which is why I say that it is a modernized plantation. Of course, it's never going to be what it was in the past. Nothing in America is ever going to be what it was in the past. The world has changed, and with it, so have their techniques. So I hope that better clarifies what I meant by that. I want to get to as many questions as possible, so I want to go back and forth.
Okay, it's not like a huge thing. I just so when you're talking about education, I don't understand how you can make the assumption that it's controlled by the federal government when the education system is a state-by-state thing. So
no, the Department of Education is federal.
Although that is true in terms of curriculum, it is specifically curated by the state.
Yeah, no, but they receive money from the federal government if they teach certain initiatives.
Funding doesn't equate to what gets produced in textbooks. So I just think that it literally can't be equated to overall slavery by saying people aren't getting properly
I think we have a fundamental, I get what you're saying. I just want to get to more questions, but I think we have a fundamental disagreement there. When they're accepting money to teach certain initiatives, there was never an LGBTQ agenda in the classroom. They weren't teaching kids that they could pick their gender. It's not just a coincidence that they're starting to teach this all across America, everywhere in every classroom. It is quite literal dollars. They say we will give you, in the same way that I said, we'll give you more money not to marry your husband, we will give you more money if you teach these certain things, and this is being thought up by a $1 trillion budget, the Department of Education. I personally believe the Department of Education should be abolished so that the states really do have control over what they're teaching children. But we disagree on it. And I really appreciate your question. Very sweet. Thank you so much. This side and then back to you.
So first of all, I'd just like to thank you. As someone from across the aisle, it is very refreshing to hear someone from the right hear us. And I really, really just appreciate that. So that's the first thing.
Thank you for being here.
I think as somebody who is distinctly, I disagree with what you have to say, I can see where you want to see the left meet in the middle, but oftentimes when I see the right in the media, and not just in the leftist media, by the way, I do read Fox News, Breitbart, all of that. I know, right? Crucify me. But anyways, it doesn't seem like the right wants to meet in the middle, and maybe that's just a perspective thing, but if that's the case, then is it not just a perspective thing on the right too? I feel like both sides, there are people that want to meet in the middle.
I think that's a fair assessment, and it's actually interesting because I agree with you. I do not want to meet in the middle on transgenderism. I want to win. I think it's a horrible, evil, backwards, corrupt ideology. And so I think the problem is that there's too many conservatives and liberals that are lying. There's no middle ground for me on transgenderism. I'm not like, I'll meet you halfway, give them the hormones when they're 7 as opposed to 6. There are certain ideologies that I think just need to be plain out defeated. And so you're right. That's what I'm going to say. You're right. Thank you so much for your comment. Very nice. And thank you for being here, by the way.
I'm not that great of a speaker, so I'll try to keep it short.
I'm easy to talk to.
Yeah. All right. So first off, I want to say there's probably a lot of things that people would agree with you with, but this kind of touches on what he did, what he talked about, where I feel like what you say kind of is very divisive. And, well, I'll just get to the point. Okay, so I think when you say victimhood mentality, that kind of belittles struggles that a lot of Americans do actually have. And you said one of the biggest issues that blacks are facing is one, fatherlessness, and two, education. And me personally, I feel like those things are heavily correlated. But like when you go to your like Blexit website, for example, I feel like it's more conservative, like propaganda, rather than doing something to help black people. And when you go to the Get Involved page, it kind of says like page not found.
I'm sorry, get involved?
Yeah, on the website.
Oh,
on
I didn't know
Blexit.
that. Thank you.
But I feel like that could do something like, you know, figuring out how to get people to help their local education systems in people that live in black areas, because their education system is very bad. I also think that you're not obligated to like do these things, but when you I feel like conservatives often like misrepresent affirmative action and are actively against it, and those things do help a lot of minorities and women get jobs and be educated in college.
I'm just going to pause you because you're saying a lot of things. I want you to respond
okay,
to all of them.
so
the first thing I want to respond to is, I'll let you get to your past, but my memory ain't that great. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is if that webpage, if there was something wrong on the website, thank you for flagging that, and I'll get that fixed. Secondly, one of the things that really upsets me is when people say that it's just propaganda, what Blexit is. We do so much in the inner city communities every single weekend. We host events in inner city communities. We have scholarships to send black Americans to school. I donated almost $100,000 to black-owned businesses that were destroyed during the Black Lives Matter riots, and we have an active after-school programs to help black moms who are single parents put their kids somewhere so that they don't end up on the streets. And we're now expanding that across the 44 chapters that we have. We have an after-school program and a summer camp program. So it is not just propaganda, it's real work. You don't get to hear about it because the media makes people think that I'm a monster. The second thing that I want to say about affirmative action is it hasn't helped black Americans. The proof is in the pudding. And you should really, really read Clarence Thomas on this and Thomas Sowell on this. And I'm going to tell you what actually happens when black students are put into schools that they don't actually belong in. So Thomas Sowell was teaching as an adjunct professor at, I'm saying Clemson because I'm here. It is not Clemson. It is in the Northeast. It is another C school. Doesn't matter. It's completely irrelevant where it was. As an adjunct professor, and he realized that all of the black students, Cornell, that's where it was, all the black students were on academic probation. So he went to explore why all the black students were on academic probation, and it was because none of those students belonged at that school. They were put into that school based on affirmative action. So what happened was they were in schools. Now here's what's interesting. They were in schools mismatched based on affirmative action. Now these kids, they were at Cornell. If they had just been put in the schools that they deserved to be on, they would have been at the top of the class, okay? You're forcing them to go into schools and compete with people that are quite literally better able to perform better, to think faster, when there's no reason to. Why would you want a black person to be on academic probation out of Cornell when they could be at the top of their class somewhere else, right? This has been what has been happening, repeat all over the United States. When I say Clarence Thomas has written extensively about how you are forcing black people to fail by not allowing them to enter the schools that they actually belong at, right? Because you think it looks good to put them into those schools. It doesn't look good. We need to actually do good. So I'm staunchly against affirmative action because all of the proof has shown that it actually harms black Americans and it doesn't actually help them. Even if the idea was we want to give them a leg up, it isn't doing that. Do you have the last part of the question?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I meant by like misrepresenting affirmative action, because affirmative action does a lot of things, like reach out to high schools and get them involved with college and get them in summer programs and a lot of things like that that do help students be prepared for college and perform better.
That's called recruitment. That's not affirmative action. I'm talking about.
That's part of affirmative action, like in the definition. Like if you go to Wikipedia, that's like.
Well, I'm talking, when I say I don't support affirmative action, I'm talking about discriminatory practices specifically. I think it's great to recruit people.
But my question is basically, how do you feel like the Conservative Party is different from the Democratic Party when it comes to actually helping the Black community, because those things that you mentioned about Brexit, I think those are like very good things.
Yeah.
And I wish they were like on the website, like in the front page.
It is on the website.
Well,
it is on the website.
Okay, sorry, I just didn't see it. when I went
Lexicamp
there.
is on the website.
But
I'll answer that last
yeah.
question because I do want to get more people
Well,
to be able to say things. Now, first and foremost, you're talking about the Republican Party. I have major gripes with the Republican Party. I think the Republican Party gave up on Black Americans. They just got tired of being called racist, and who can blame them? Every time you say something, if you say Black America, what do you have to lose? The media is absolutely hysterical, claiming that you're a racist. They got tired of that. When I first made an entry into the Republican Party, I remember having a conversation with somebody at the RNC who quite literally said, there's just no point, we might as well focus on Spanish Americans. So you don't hear me running around being like, the Republican Party is amazing. I'm a conservative. I commit to conservative principles. That means I necessarily vote Republican, but there's plenty of fixing that needs to be done in the Republican Party as well, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a Republican that doesn't agree with that. Thank you so much for your question.
Hey, Candace.
Hey.
I promise to take it easy on you. So you touched on the subject of our children earlier. It's very important to me because I have a niece that will be a year old 1 week from today.
Aww.
So I believe that they are the most threatened group in America. The left fights for the mutilation of children's bodies, sexuality and gender affirmation in schools, abortion, and now Trans Day of Visibility after the slaying of 3 children by a trans killer in Nashville. Why does the left strive to see our children miserable, destructed, and even dead in the name of progressivism, and how can we protect them in a society that is perceived to be in the left's control?
You know, my husband once said, and I thought he was joking, and then we really got to talking about it, but he's always said that the left was a death cult, and I thought he was just being hyperbolic, and then he explained to me exactly what you're saying. He's like, no, everything they advocate for actually leads to death. You know, you're talking about abortion, you're talking about getting people to mutilate their own bodies. He's like, you'll never hear, apocalyptic climate change, we're all gonna die, don't have a family, and I realized that he was right. So, sorry, your question was how or why?
Why do they want to see this
Yeah,
from our children?
I do genuinely believe is because what they're ultimately after is human enslavement in the Western Hemisphere. I believe that actually what our government wants to do is to model itself after the CCP. So all of that hard talk about China, it's the exact opposite. I think they see what China has done, a nation of 1.5 billion subservient individuals, and how they've been able to do that is through ideology, right? The Chinese people have no memory of freedom. You say it's 1.5 billion people. Where are the uprisings in China? Where's Chinese lives matter, right? Why aren't they going, we're not going to deal with this anymore? And the truth is because what would they be fighting for? They've never had freedom. They don't even understand the concept of freedom. That's not even a word. What are you talking about? So they just work like slaves and they do whatever the government says, including don't have more than 2 children, right? Remember the China one-child policy that they had at a certain point. That seems unimaginable in America. Well, imagine it, because look at how much power the government seized during COVID. You have never thought in a day in America you would have had a situation where people were being told they couldn't go to work and they couldn't see their family members. That happened here in America. So what they're after is full control over every aspect of human life. Thank you so much for your question. What's up?
Hey, how's it going?
What's up? Hey.
Cool. All right. I have a little like written thing, so okay. Last month there was an affirmative action bake sale on campus sponsored by TPUSA, where there was a dollar amount ascribed to each race to symbolize the level of difficulty of getting into college due to affirmative action. I know that the affirmative action bake sale has been used as a sort of political protest for a while, but do you think there are better ways to express your viewpoint through political and social protests regarding affirmative action without ascribing a dollar amount to racial identities? Also, do you think that the affirmative action bake sale should continue to happen? And do you think it's an effective way to get people who happen to be left-leaning to kind of change their mind about it?
Well, are you left-leaning?
It's not the question.
No, I'm allowed to ask a question back. There's no rules.
I know, but I don't know. I just want to hear your.
Well, because an answer would be implied of whether or not if you felt something and you're upset about it and it's making you want to have a discussion about it, then that could be their ultimate goal.
Well, it's not that necessarily I don't know. I'm just asking for your viewpoint on it.
Yeah, and my viewpoint is that's why I asked you if you're left-leaning, is I was going to ask you how you felt about it, right? You could ask yourself this question. Were you persuaded by it? Did you think that it was good?
It's just like the optics of the situation, given that you see kind of each racial identity is given a certain dollar amount. And Black people are kind of rated as 50 cents. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of you know, I get what they're trying to say, but also like Clemson University used to be a plantation, so
Yeah.
like there's
Yeah,
kind
well,
of that altitude,
listen,
like,
so what you're saying is you found it to be offensive. Is that a fair characterization?
I mean, yeah, I guess you could say offensive, but at the end of the day, I'm also looking at it from the viewpoint of like, I know that's not what people necessarily intended to, you know, convey, and I'm trying to like, I guess, figure out for myself too, like, I guess a way to more effectively communicate.
I think, first off, just letting them hear your feedback is a good thing. Conversation is always a great thing to hear, and obviously what they're trying to convey is that they're offended as well. I mean, for me personally, if I was an Asian American in this country, I would be offended every single time I applied to university. They're actively being discriminated against because they've done the right thing and they've worked hard. So people, you know, you're offended, I'm offended, he's offended, she's offended. Yeah, that's kind of the point. I mean, they're actively being discriminated against because they're not the right color, right? So you're talking about a relic of the past, right? I see the dollars, makes me think of the plantation, blah, 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 blah. They're talking about a relic of the present where there's actually discriminatory practices in place. Now, whether or not it's the most effective strategy is something that I think you should foster and have a discussion with, but I do completely understand that to draw attention in a productive way and say, hey, this makes you upset. Could you imagine how it feels to be a person that worked hard their entire life? Like I have a girl who works for me, a 4.3 GPA, graduated from high school, and basically couldn't get into anywhere because she was white. I mean, I can't even imagine going through that. So
yeah,
I can't answer your question perfectly because I don't go here, but I do think it's great that you're...
I agree with what you're saying for the most part. It's just that I don't think the way to, I guess, get people to change their viewpoint or the way to like spread your message is to like further offend people.
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of
You should tell them.
Polarized.
Yeah, great.
Like state that we're in regarding politics. But
fair.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your feedback. Thank you.
Hi,
Hey.
Candace. First off, thank you for coming to campus today to speak to us. I enjoyed it.
Thank
and
you.
Blackout is one of my mom's favorite books.
Aww.
So I have a two-part question. First, I'm born and raised, and when I'm not studying, I live in New Hampshire.
Sorry, you're born and raised where?
New Hampshire.
Okay.
So we pride ourselves on being first in the nation to vote and having candidates come to us and fight for every vote at town halls and small events. Lately, Joe Biden specifically and the DNC has removed New Hampshire from first in the nation voting because, quote, we are not racially diverse enough to represent the whole nation and should not have a large influence over national politics. And then part two is, do you plan on driving up to New Hampshire to do any campaigning for yourself or another candidate this election season?
I will definitely not be driving up to New Hampshire because that's a long drive from Tennessee. And I have young kids, and I don't know about 2 under 2 driving up to New Hampshire. But to your first question, it's sad. It sets the tone. I think that what it shows you is that the Democrats have placed a lot of faith in their ability to divide people based on race and to get people to believe that what they're doing is righteous because they're saying what they basically think is that they control Black Americans. The more that they can focus on areas where Black Americans are, the more they can get their own policies and their ideas pushed. It literally is racism. And unfortunately, time and time again, it's been proven to be true, is that Black Americans align with Democrats nonsensibly. There's literally no piece of evidence that Democrats have done anything good for them, but they have been able to control and warp their minds via emotion. And this is exactly what I fight every single day, because I do believe that there will be a day where Black Americans will recognize that. And as soon as you shatter the race narrative, as soon as Black Americans wake up and see what Democrats are doing, none of that stuff will be able to fly. So it's horrible, and I hope it changes, which is why I do what I do. Thank you so much. Hello.
Hi. I just had a question. You mentioned just a tiny bit in your speech earlier, capitalism, the free market, things like that. I just had a question. With the rise of AI kind of aggressively getting better and better by the day and increasing automation, what do you see as like the future? Do you think capitalism's really a viable solution going into the future?
Okay, yes, and I'm going to tell you why. This is a very good discussion, and I should probably do a monologue on it and think about it much more deeply. But what I will say to you is that every time there is a technological boom, there are people that believe that there's going to be no more jobs. This is like a fear that kind of that keeps being presented all throughout American history. It's like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Like now that there's cars, what about the horses and people that are doing? You know what I mean? Like people start to freak out every time technology becomes, and they think that humanity is going to be displaced. So I look to the past, I examine the past, I see the future, and I think that there are going to be different opportunities that are going to be created, that there's never going to be a society where you just don't need human beings. So now I might be being way too optimistic about it. I'm much more concerned about the AI voice technology. Freaks me out beyond anything when people can make my voice say something that I haven't said. And I think that that's a scary thing to imagine what the government can do with that power. You can ruin someone's life. So that is where you will get me fully like hiding under the blankets, terrified about things, and I don't even want to think about it right now, so I'm no longer answering this question. Goodbye. Thank you.
Hi, Candace. Thank you for coming to Clemson to speak with us.
Thank
I'm a member
you.
of our chapter here, and it's an honor to have you here with us. So I kind of have a two-parter. Firstly, have you ever considered running for political office? Because I think the idiots up in Washington could use someone like you. And
Thank you.
secondly, so like you, I think it's important to try to find common ground with our friends on the other side of the aisle. I have liberal friends, and I love them. I respect that they feel differently. But like you, one thing I will not waver on is the transgender issue. And as someone who wants to raise a family one day and have kids, and you said you have young kids, how do we and when you turn 18, you could do whatever you want. I believe in limited government. But for people under the age of 18, how do we put an end to this foul, disgusting practice that has corrupted the minds of our children?
It's so disgusting. It infuriates me. I agree. And the thing is that the first thing we have to do is be unapologetic in discussing it. Right now, we have had a bunch of people that are seized by fear. They're so afraid to be called a bigot, a transphobe, a homophobe, that they will literally sit back idly while children's bodies are being mutilated. Don't be that person, right? It is literally a vile practice. I believe people that are partaking in this, from doctors, psychologists to psychiatrists, are all going to burn in hell for what they are doing to these children, quite literally, right? The problem is that I believe this is the majority of people who feel this way, and yet they are the silent majority that feels this way, and we have a very loud minority on the trans issues, and the media is a part of the minority, but because they have a major megaphone, people can wrongly believe that it is the majority. So it is an act of evil not to speak up against evil, especially when it comes to our children. That's what I would say. Thank you. Oh.
My first question, do you ever plan on running for political office? Like, seriously, I will vote for you.
Honestly, I hate politics. This is why I do what I do every day. I can't stand politicians. I hate the way that they lie to people. It makes me sick. And the truth is that right now I'm running behind toddlers, and it's the best part of my day every day. I love being a mom and I love being a wife, and so I'm comfortable where I'm at, but I'd never say never. Thank you. Hey.
So I am the chairman of College Republicans, and last year we spoke out against the drag show that they held on campus. So having another one in 10 days. Last year it was in this room, it might be in this room again. But given, speaking out against, a drag show here on campus, what would you say to those that are going to be hosting this absolutely abhorrent event?
It's debauchery. It's so weird to me. It's like, why would you host that? It's something that, I can't even fathom from me being on college campus. This is not educational. It's not educational whatsoever. So this is not us having a conversation, talking about our disagreements, figuring out where we all agree. That's not academic. There's nothing academic about a man cross-dressing as a woman. So I just don't understand how it's even allowed on a college campus. Like, I don't care if you in your own personal capacity want to go to a strip club or go to a drag show and dabble in that, but I really don't understand how people were able to bring this to a university where the climate is supposed to be about, enriching your minds and learning something. It's a total freak show. I will always stand against it. I don't care what people do in their personal capacities, but it is the publicity of it, and suddenly now being convinced that children need to be exposed to it, drag queen story time, and these sorts of initiatives that make me sick. So, like I said, continue to speak up against it. It is, unfortunately, it's a free society. If people want to subject themselves to that insanity and to see that because it makes them feel liberated somehow, to see a man sexualize himself and cross-dress and wear women's underwear, so be it, but I'll bet you'll be better off in society once you leave the university. That's what I would say about that.
Thank you.
Just so you know, we're only going to do 3 more questions.
3 more questions. So that gives us 1, 2, and 3. And I always feel bad for the person right behind, because it's just like, oh my God, you were so close. It's horrible. Okay, go ahead.
So
they said this, not me. It was them, not me. Go ahead.
So my question is, with the attack on the family, what steps do you think we should take to reaffirm the family for example, homeschooling? Like, what steps would you take?
Love homeschool, probably going to homeschool my kids, which is so funny because I thought people in homeschool were like, I grew up believing, oh, those are the weird kids. Now I'm like, those are the cool kids. Those are the sane kids. I will be homeschooling my children. And that goes back to me trying to tell women that we need to reassert ourselves in the home. What modern feminism did was it married women to the state. It said to women, your place is in the workplace, and that you should want to climb the corporate ladder and let us raise your kids, let the state raise your kids. And I think that we have suffered tremendously since that push in the 1970s. So yeah, to reaffirm the families, be a hero, do something courageous, start a family, aspire to family. You know what I mean? Don't be afraid to get married. Don't let society convince you that you have to be making $200,000 a year and be climbing the corporate. No, you can start a family. You can get married younger, especially now that I live in Tennessee and I see all of these like wonderful 20-year-olds that are married and they love the Lord. They go to church every Sunday, and I realize they are getting something right in the South. And amen to that. Wow, you just made the cutoff. So lucky.
Luckily, yeah. First off, I want to say thank you for coming, and the short hair looks great on you.
Thank you.
But
love this guy already.
So I follow you on Instagram, and I see that you go to the gym at like 4 or 5 in the morning, and I've started doing the same. Not that
yes,
early, but
love this guy.
Along with like the LGBT movement that's like being like sprung up. The body positivity movement is also being sprung up, and it's kind of taken over people's minds. And I just want to know what your opinion is on it, and if you think that it's damaging the mental health among the people that.
Of course, it's back to the death cult philosophy, right? They're celebrating obesity. Obesity is and always has been the #1 killer in America. Okay, is the #1 killer in modern times. Obesity. It leads to heart disease, and heart disease is the #1 killer, right? So it's incredible that you can now look at the cover of Cosmopolitan magazine, and they'll have a clinically obese person, and they will say that fat is healthy. That is a lie. It is an unbelievable lie, which is why we call it satanic, because Satan is the author of lies and deceptions, and what they're trying to train people to do is to take pride in killing themselves, literally killing themselves. I talk about Lizzo on my show the entire time. Do you want to know why I talk about Lizzo? Not only because she's fat, it's because she's also incredibly talented, okay? Why would people who are fans of Lizzo want to encourage her to kill herself? It's incredible to me. I'm the enemy because I tell Lizzo, hey, Lizzo, you've got a lot of money now, right? It's okay, you ate a few extra calories. You can get to the gym. You can get down into a healthy weight. She could have a chef. She could have a trainer. People fall off the wagon for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes it's because of health. Sometimes it's because of stress, loss of a loved one. My dad was 100 pounds overweight. My dad struggled with weight his entire life. He recently lost 100 pounds. It's never too late to even aspire to lose weight. But let me tell you one thing in my household. We weren't encouraging him to eat crap. It wasn't like, Dad, I love you. Eat a whole pack of donuts. This is literally what they're doing, right? I love you so much. Keep stuffing your face. Get fatter. That is not love. That is hate. That is hatred for these individuals. And so the fat acceptance movement, why would you accept something that you can better in your life? I hate these acceptance. Love yourself as you are. No, be better. Be better tomorrow than you were today. Expect that you're going to fall off the wagon, right? But get back on. Oh, selfie? Final question.
Okay, this is my dream to speak to you.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you're the last question.
So, as an 8th grade South Carolinian,
Are you in 8th grade?
Yes,
ma'am. Oh my God, it's so sweet. Thank you for being here.
Our standards are insane. So I was taught just last week that Earth has been around for billions and billions of years, while I'm also told that uniformitarianism, which is the stated theory that the processes that occur now also happened back yonder in the olden days. Well, they also admit that catastrophic events could occur, so they just completely disregard everything that they just said and then just, oh, well, I mean, we could be wrong, though, but, I mean, we're not. And also, I was given a worse grade compared to one of my friends who wrote an essay that transgender people should be allowed to swim and do sports, even though they were men, while I wrote an opinion piece, and I was too biased for this, for writing that we should not have transgender surgery for children. under 18 years of age.
That terrifies me.
We're additionally taught that we can disregard everything that Abraham Lincoln did to free the slaves, all because he didn't sign a bill immediately to give equal civil rights to all people, and then he was assassinated. So we didn't know what he was going to do with the bill. So we're just taught completely, oh, well, it could have happened, but it didn't. We're right.
Yeah. It's so scary because it's crazy to realize, you when you're your age and in high school, you learn a lot about propaganda, and they always correlate it to World War II and to Adolf Hitler, and you learn it and you study it through a lens of like, this could never happen in America, but it is literally happening in America. Like Hitler youth, Stalin youth is literally what's happening in American classrooms today, where they're indoctrinating them with principles, and it's all about teaching them certain philosophies. And I can examine that in the rearview mirror because I'm listening to you talk, and this never happened. We learned to celebrate Abe when I was your age. Like this was like, he's one of the most amazing presidents, honest Abe, and all of these things, and now it's the exact opposite. The concept of transgenderism, oh my God, forget it. There wasn't even like a category. They didn't even talk about lesbian and gay in the classroom because we were allowed to just be children, okay? We didn't have to think about those things. If we had questions about that, it was assumed that we would go speak to our parents. And now to hear you saying that you're having these sorts of conversations in 8th grade and you're being penalized for not taking the perspective that men should be allowed to take over women's sports, something that was carved out for women, should be, if feminism was real, the #1 feminist issue right now is that men are taking over sports, right? So what I will say to you is that you are already head and shoulders ahead of everybody else because you have a good head on your shoulders, and what will happen inevitably is that you will be more successful because you're thinking straight. Your parents hopefully are aligning with you because let me tell you something. On the day that my daughter comes home with a bad grade because she didn't take a leftist perspective is the day that mommy's going to school and is going to sit in the principal's office.
Oh, no, it was still an exceptional grade because I can write pretty okay. But it was still like 4 points lower than hers.
She's like, I got an A rather than an A+. Well, I love that, and we need more people that are courageous like you. Don't back down from your opinions, and do what I did, man. Give those professors and teachers hell and get the good grade. Bless you. You guys, thank you so much. I also want to thank all of the amazing police officers that are working at this event. Thank you so much for your time. Applaud them. We forever back the blue. Realize what they're going through, you guys. Bless you so much. Especially thank you to you guys who disagreed and came anyways and asked questions respectfully. Love it. I will be back, I promise, Clemson. Thanks so much for having me.
It breaks his heart seeing foreign cars.